Just starting over on E4, Party of Five. Here, Jon Snow with Kirsty Lang and Channel 4 News.
My goal at this election is this. It is not just to win your vote. It is to win your heart and your mind.
Majority a lead in the polls, but still worried about connecting with hearts and minds. The teenaged schoolgirls to whom Mr Blair announced the election date exuding bemusement. Good evening. The sun shone on Tony Blair's election parade today. The rain, foot and mouth, and any other bad news in the past for the moment. Indeed, is it mere coincidence that there's just one new case in the dreaded outbreak so far today? Tonight, they're off. But how many people really care? Apathy. How big's the won't vote faction? Can it be provoked to action? And if it isn't, which party takes the biggest hit? The mountain climbers hit the trail. Haig on a brave if beleaguered soapbox. Kennedy already on his battle bus. Plus,
I'll be looking at what William needs to do to reduce Tony's whopping majority. Will it shrink or grow even bigger? Watch this space.
And I'm in Kettering, the most marginal Labour seat in the country, talking to voters to find out if this election really is a foregone conclusion.
And the other headlines tonight, oil companies face protests as BP announces record profits, and environmentalists target Esso over global warming. Ronald Biggs' son breaks down, describing how he begged his father not to return to Britain. And prosecutors in the Jill Dando murder trial offer new forensic evidence against the man accused of the killing.
very new Labour. Tony Blair chose a backdrop of him singing schoolchildren for his long-awaited announcement that the general election will be held on June the 7th. Mr Blair urging voters to give him a second term, saying he was seeking a mandate for fresh, radical change. The Conservative leader, William Hague, said his campaign will reach out to what he called the real people of our country, while the Liberal Democrats' Charles Kennedy promised better public services with tax rises to pay for them. So as the parties begin their campaigns in earnest, here's our political editor, Eleanor Goodman.
It was an election launch calculated to cut through media cynicism and engage the emotions. For Labour wants this campaign to be as much about defeating apathy as the opposition. Having told the Queen, Mr Blair went to a South London school to tell the nation.
Earlier today, I saw the Queen at Buckingham Palace to ask for a dissolution of Parliament so that there can be a general election on the 7th of June.
He then outlined the theme that will run through his campaign: humility and hope.
4 years has given us the chance to build foundations, but the work now has to go on. There is a lot done. There is a lot more to do, and there is a lot at stake in this election. Perhaps choices more fundamental than at any time for many years in our country.
Very few in his audience will actually have the vote, but for Mr Blair, these children were the future personified.
Of a great goal achieved. And my goal at this election is this. It is not just to win your vote. It is to win your heart and your mind for the change that our country needs to face the challenges of the future.
The children then joined Tony Blair in a hymn of praise, creating an almost evangelical atmosphere for a campaign which Mr Blair hopes will make him the first Labour leader to get a mandate for a full second term. A second term in which Labour will unapologetically put public investment on things like education ahead of tax cuts. And he wants to rekindle some of the old excitement in what is now slightly less new Labour, hence the importance of scenes like this. This looks like 100 photo opportunities at the last election. The kids, the cheers, the demonstration outside. But this time, Labour can't count on being swept along by a tide for change. Instead, it's saying that it's done a lot, but acknowledging that it hasn't done as much as people would have liked. And that's a more difficult message to get people enthusiastic about. The Liberal Democrat leader also used an audience of school children to launch his campaign.
We're arguing for is fair taxes which will provide...
That almost certainly went over the heads of his audience, but the message for their parents was that the Liberal Democrats are prepared to increase taxes to pay for better services, whatever the political risk.
We're going to put the Liberal Democrats' quality service delivery in the public sector at the heart of our campaign. That means in education, a penny in income tax for lower class sizes, for more investment in books and equipment, and for lifting the burden on our teachers.
This campaign will be a test of Charlie Kennedy's leadership, for in this election the Liberal Democrats are having to defend more seats than ever before, most of them from Conservative attack. This afternoon Mr Hague was visiting one of those seats, Taunton, again those ubiquitous children. Mr Hague starts this campaign in a worse position than any opposition leader since Michael Foot in '83, having only once overtaken Labour during this Parliament. The danger to him is that Labour succeeds in making the campaign a referendum on his leadership of the Tory party, and that speculation about a possible leadership contest after the election drowns out the Tories' own attempts to exploit disappointment in Labour's record.
Should we give him a second chance? And we are going to take our campaign out to the real people around the country, not to the politically correct people who are often the commentators on politics, to the real people.
The Tories are putting their hopes in targeting, showing off today Geneva, their telephone call centre, part of a phone bank which will phone 9,000 floating voters a night. They say the calls, like the local election results, show the opinion polls understate the Tory performance. They also claim the calls show it will be impossible for Labour to sideline the debate on Europe.
OK, thanks very much.
I think Europe, of course, is a very important issue. I know the Labour Party don't want to talk about it, but I'm going to make them talk about it, because they are signing away more and more of the rights and powers of this country. This is people's opportunity to say we want to be in Europe, but not run by Europe.
Tomorrow, the party leaders will meet head-on in the Commons for one last encounter. The ideological divide at this election is probably the greatest since '87. But the one thing they all agree on is the need to enthuse voters and convince them that this election isn't won before it starts.
Eleanor Goodman. So the date is set, but what if no one turns up? With enthusiasm conspicuous by its absence, could it mean the lowest general election turnout since the end of the First World War? Channel 4 News will be tracking the trends in voting intention between now and polling day. So let's have a first look at our apathy index. At this stage, ahead of the 1992 election, 80% of those polled said they were certain or very likely to vote. 5 weeks later, the turnout was just under 78%. At the start of the 1997 campaign, 78% expected to vote. The actual turnout was just over 71%. This time, only 71% are confident of voting. So that could suggest a turnout of 65% or less. Our political correspondent Gary Gibbon investigates now who might not bother to vote and whether it matters.
If that doesn't make you want to put your coat on and get down to the polling station, nothing will.
Where once we fought for the vote, now it seems we fight for the remote control. Elections are becoming more and more of a turn-off. At least one expert is predicting turnout could fall to 61%.
For a liberal democracy, to have a large decrease in turnout is one of the most serious warning signals that it can possibly get. It's a warning signal to the political elite that distrust of government, is becoming a major influence on political behaviour.
The politicians' favourite word for this phenomenon is apathy. Non-voters are portrayed as slobs. But one friend of Tony Blair, who helped to run his leadership campaign, thinks declining political involvement is a positive sign.
It's actually a healthy society that can make politics of secondary importance. If you live in a society where politics is paramount, then you're unlucky, because something must be wrong for it to be as important as that.
I think that's really one of the many pieces of waffle that takes the place of political discussion nowadays.
Eric Hobsbawm worries that it's in the poorest areas like Liverpool Toxteth that polling stations have become virtual no-go areas. Declining turnout here, he says, is shaping a new politics biased towards the haves and against the have-nots.
The really serious aspect of it is that the less people participate in the vote, the more politics, the political process, becomes a specialized activity concerning certain groups, middle-class groups, the richer rather than the poorer.
Mr Hague denies Labour claims that he wants to repeat the dismal turnouts that helped his party to victory in the European and local elections.
Well, I don't want a low turnout, I want people to take part in this election.
But both William Hague and Tony Blair know that their own unpopularity is putting off many voters. That, along with greater distrust of all politicians, the unprecedented Labour lead in the polls, perhaps also devolution, look like helping to bring turnout to a record low.
I just think it's all a load of rubbish, to be quite honest. I don't vote. I never have voted. I just think whatever you vote, you never get.
I don't know, the issues just don't seem very important to me at the moment, that's all.
Most people, I don't think, really give a toss, so there we are.
The non-voting party is itself divided into factions. They're not all habitual electoral truants. 1 million Tory voters are thought to have stayed at home for the first time at the last election. And it's become acceptable in some left-wing circles to say you're sitting this one out.
I think people should vote for what they genuinely think, and if there's no one there, then they shouldn't bother. It's as simple as that. Why should you elect someone who doesn't represent you? Why should you elect someone who doesn't share your aspirations, who doesn't share your vision of the world? Why should you bother doing that?
Gary Gibbon with me, the Trade and Industry Secretary, Stephen Byers, and the Liberal Democrats Treasury spokesman Matthew Taylor. The Shadow Home Secretary, Anne Widdecombe, joins us from Derby. Stephen Byers, the Prime Minister has attacked cynicism as being one of the great causes of difficulty in provoking people to get involved in the political system. And yet, what could be more cynical than grabbing a bunch of unsuspecting school kids to announce the general election date in front of?
Well, the clips I saw showed that they were actually really enjoying it. There were lots of laughter. They were celebrating the fact they had the Prime Minister there, and also that it's a school which has dramatically improved the results that it's been able to achieve, thanks to those pupils and to the teachers, along with many other schools that have improved dramatically in the last 4 years as well.
I saw you responding with a hunch of the shoulders.
Well, I think the kids were great when the Prime Minister arrived, the cameras were there, it was all exciting. When the Prime Minister went on and on and on, delivering a speech that clearly wasn't directed at those children at all, then I think there was a lot of bum shifting in the seats. And I think it is a shame, because it's about something that Labour have got wrong. This whole kind of spin approach, this rather glossy approach that doesn't engage with people and has added a little to that cynicism that, well, politicians really don't mean it.
Anne Widdecombe, you lost 1 million voters at the last election. In truth, you're all to blame, aren't you?
Not at all. In fact, I've met quite a lot who are telling me that they're going to vote for us this time. And I think the reason for that is very straightforward, that this government promised the earth when it came in. It now comes to us with a pathetic plea that it's been spending 4 years building foundations. Well, if all it's done in 4 years is lay some foundations, I say get yourselves another builder.
Well, get yourselves another builder. I mean, what's your response to that, Stephen Byers?
Well, I actually had very difficulty hearing what Anne was saying, I'm afraid. So
no, she said that the Prime Minister had asked for, another 4 years, having built the foundations to get going. She said, frankly, if that's all you've done in 4 years, you better get yourselves another builder.
Well, the reality is, if you talk to the 1.3 million more people in work, they all tell you this government has done a lot in the last 4 years. The fact we've got 1.5 million people now benefiting from the national minimum wage, they'll tell you we've done a lot. The fact that we've now got the cheapest mortgages that we've had for generations, good news for homeowners, and they know that 10 years ago, mortgage rates and interest rates were at 15%. We had 1 million homeowners in negative equity. We had 200,000 homes repossessed.
But you're talking
They're
about
not
the
going to go
past.
back to
What
that.
about this building?
No, I'm talking about what we've been able to do in the last 4 years. So what we've been able to do, I think we can take pride in. But we also acknowledge, as the Prime Minister did this afternoon, that there's a lot to do as well, and in particular, reforming and changing public services, getting standards up in our schools, having good quality healthcare, tackling crime and disorder, a transport system that we can take pride in the years ahead.
Matthew Taylor, I mean, the problem is you've been swimming along in the slipstream of this foundation building. It's very difficult to define yourselves as anything other than props.
No, the difference is that we would actually make the investment in education, health, pensions, more police on the beat that would make the difference. There is you can't get something for nothing, and that's fundamentally, I think, why there is a disillusionment with Labour. The Conservatives were a disaster. People were delighted, and I think we all remember how delighted people were when the Conservatives got kicked out. There was a sense of relief because they'd been such a disaster and would be again. But Labour promised that things could only get better. They said that things would change in health, 24 hours to save the health service, education would be the first priority. In fact, they stuck to Conservative spending plans for 3 years. That meant big cuts, and they haven't recovered from the disillusion that led to, or come to that, the longer waiting lists, the larger class sizes that are inevitably delivered, and that's the difference we'll make.
And Widdicombe, talking of foundations, surely that is your big problem, is that your foundations are looking decidedly shaky. Questions constantly about the leadership, who's going to challenge Mr Hague after the election, rather than policy.
What we're going to be doing over these next 4 weeks is concentrating on policy. And what is more, we've been putting forward policies for some time, but the difference over the next 4 weeks is that they're going to have to be covered because the nation is going to be asked to make a choice. And what we will be saying is we will give you common sense. Common sense in law and order, for example, giving the citizen the right to defend himself if he is the subject of a criminal act. We will be saying common sense in health, treat the sickest patients first, don't try and fiddle numbers on lists all the time. We will be saying common sense over Europe, in Europe but not run by Europe, remaining the ones who determine our own affairs, who keep control of our own frontiers. Those are the sorts of things that we shall be saying. I know that that is what the British people want, and I know that when they actually get to examine the policies over the next few weeks, they will actually be very swayed by that, and you may want to sit and talk about nothing except leadership. What we shall talk about is the leadership of the country over the next 5 years, which we believe we can give and take people in the direction they want the country to go.
Conservatives say they're going to spend 10 days on Europe, and Europe is currently hovering around the 7th or 8th most interesting thing to voters. But are you going to come out on Europe and actually declare where you really are, or are you too just going to be in Europe but not run by Europe?
No, our position on Europe is very clear. First of all, we need to reform Europe. That means the institutions that operate there. It also means pushing forward the economic reform agenda for Europe, which we began in Lisbon last year.
What I'm asking you? I'm asking, are you actually going to make it clear where you are on the euro?
Yeah, I was going
which,
to come on to
after
that,
all, you had the opportunity to clarify in the last government.
There's not just one issue about Europe. There is a reform agenda that we need to push on. And there is the question of the single European currency. And our position here is absolutely clear, which is the Chancellor has laid down the 5 economic conditions that will need to be met. If they are met, and they'll be assessed within 2 years of the election on June the 7th, then we will recommend to the Parliament and to the British people joining a single European currency. But it will be for the British people to decide. And I trust the British people here. The interesting point, of course, is the Tories are denying them that opportunity. They're ruling it out, but they might go in 5 years' time. What we're saying is, if it's in the national economic interest, then why don't we trust the British people to make that decision in a referendum?
Right. Well, now, I'm not going to ask you again, so I just want to ask you once, as it's the first day of the whole campaign, Anne Widdicombe, you say you're going to win. By how much?
I don't go in for those sorts of predictions. What I've said all along is this. We have the winning policies. We're addressing the things that people are concerned about. The British people have already made very clear where they stand on the currency, for example. We will respect that in the forthcoming campaign.
OK, Liberal Democrats had a handsome return last time, given their past history and the end of the last century anyway. Where are you going to be on the night?
Well, I hope that we'll gain seats. I think that people will... I don't know. That's up to British people.
What's possible?
But what's possible is the difference we've made in Scotland and Wales, where because we've been given influence by the electorate, we've actually got rid of student tuition fees, more money for teachers, schools and hospitals, and got rid of charges for the elderly when they need care in their old age.
Stephen Byers, driving for a smaller majority or increasing it?
Two things. Every single vote counts, and that's a very important message that we get.
But do you want to increase your majority?
I want a clear mandate for change in our public services, raising standards, improving the quality of those public services.
Will a reduced majority be a clear mandate?
Well, No, what I want is people to turn out and vote, and I want a good working majority. The British people will decide. It's a privilege to be in office, but what we've now got to do, with a mandate for change which will come from this election, is to improve those essential public services.
Stephen Byers, Matthew Taylor and Widdicombe, thank you all three very much. And if you want to join the debate and tell me what you think we should be talking about during this campaign, I'll be doing a live web chat straight after the news. Log on to our website to find how to get through to me. Now, there's more election coverage later in the programme. We'll be live in ultra-marginal Kettering with our battle bus talking about the issues which matter to you. Political posturing and unhelpful. Sinn Féin's response to David Trimble's threat today to resign as First Minister from the Northern Ireland Executive on the 1st of July, unless the IRA begins to hand over its weapons. Mr Trimble said he had told the Prime Minister of his action timed to coincide with the first anniversary of the pledges the IRA made at Hillsborough.
It is, in the agreement, they are committed to the total disarmament of paramilitary organisations. I don't expect to see total disarmament completed by the 1st of July, but I expect to see them begin to put their weapons beyond use, completely and verifiably, as they promised.
David Trimble. When we come back, more news and a weather forecast, and angry campaigners protest as BP's new profits show the oil giant is making £1 million an hour.
Before choosing your next washing machine, see what you get with £1. A machine so steady. A machine so strong. A machine so quiet. In 20 years' time, you'll be glad you spent your money so wisely. Miele.
Extended 0% finance is available on the Fiat Punto, Bravo, Brava and Seicento. Just call 0800 71 7000.
£1 million an hour, that's how much profit the giant oil company BP made in the first quarter of the year. Motorists are up in arms, but at least BP has a greener image than some of its rivals. Environmentalists are calling on drivers to boycott Esso petrol stations in an effort to change that firm's position on global warming. Celebrities like Bianca Jagger and Anita Roddick accuse its American parent company, ExxonMobil, of not investing enough in renewable energy. Here's our business affairs correspondent, Jonathan Rugman.
It's one of the boldest challenges to corporate power so far, a call for consumers to boycott Esso when they fill up on petrol. The Eco Coalition behind the campaign say that any of 1,500 British petrol stations could be targeted and that the boycott will be rolled out worldwide.
Esso is, the metaphor is so big. Plus they gave more money than any other company, oil industry, for the Bush campaign. And you know what happened when Mr. Bush got in, everything went belly up.
The public should send a message saying, no, we care about the environment, the Kyoto Treaty is important, and if corporations like Esso, which is the largest oil company in the world, are not concerned, we as consumers, we want to send a message where we don't want a tiger in our tank.
ExxonMobil is the world's biggest company in terms of sales and profits. Profits were $17 billion last year. The company's based in Texas, home state of President Bush, and it contributed around $1 million towards his election campaign. The company shares the president's opposition to the Kyoto Treaty, saying its carbon-reducing targets are too much too soon, and it's lobbying Mr. Bush for permission to drill in Alaska's wildlife refuge, the largest wilderness America has left. Environmentalists say that while BP and major car makers have at least begun to explore alternatives to oil, Esso refuses to accept a link between burning fossil fuels and global warming.
We want them to invest in clean energy and make sure that
drivers have a choice of oil or alternative fuels, and secondly, we want them to stop standing in the way of international negotiations and to support the Kyoto Protocol.
ExxonMobil wouldn't give us an interview, but said in a statement that a boycott could harm thousands who work at Esso stations. They said that renewable energy does not offer a substantive business opportunity for the company, and that Kyoto would impose significant economic costs in the developed world while doing little to achieve its goal of reducing emissions. Campaigners admit it may take up to 2 years for any European boycott to be effective, but it's a measure of their nerve and the growing faith they have in consumer power that they now believe they can change the mind of the world's largest corporation.
Michael Biggs, the son of great train robber Ronnie Biggs, has broken down in tears as he told reporters how he begged his father not to return to Britain. He flew back from Brazil with his 71-year-old father yesterday. Mr. Biggs Sr. is now behind bars in London's Belmarsh jail. Lindsay Taylor has this.
With his father now back behind bars, it was an emotional Michael Biggs who attempted to read from a statement in which he denied that the ailing great train robber had returned simply to receive health care.
At the age of 71, and fearing that the end of his life is closed, he has chosen to voluntarily return to this country. This decision was contrary to my wishes, and neither myself nor his family and friends in Brazil can talk him out of it. I'm sorry. Please continue. Please.
A family spokeswoman took over.
My father took this decision knowing that he would be arrested and imprisoned.
And arrested and jailed he was after flying in yesterday on a jet chartered by the Sun newspaper. It released these pictures today of the moment he was reintroduced to his past and the long arm of the law.
I'm John Coles, Detective Chief Superintendent. Pleased to meet you, he says. How'd you do? Ronald Arthur Biggs, I'm now going to formally arrest you.
Biggs, who suffered a series of strokes, said nothing as he was arrested for being unlawfully at large from Wandsworth Prison.
Do you wish to say anything or offer any other form of reply? Okay.
As Biggs spent his first night in a Belmarsh prison cell, the Press Complaints Commission began an inquiry into the deal made with the Sun newspaper and whether its code of practice has been breached.
Any payments made by the press are not for my father's direct benefit. As he knows all too well, he has no need of money now.
She said any money would go towards Biggs's legal costs. She also said he was anxious to make provision for his family.
No questions, thank you.
In future, they'll appeal to have his sentence reviewed and say all they ask is a fair hearing.
Lindsay Taylor, you're watching Channel 4 News. Coming up to 7:30, our main headlines tonight. Tony Blair has named June the 7th as election day, making the announcement at a girls' school in South London. He appealed for voters' hearts and minds and said he wanted a mandate for fresh, radical change in Labour's second term. Conservative leader William Hague has launched his campaign, accusing the government of squandering the people's goodwill by failing to deliver their promises. And the Liberal Democrats' Charles Kennedy promised to put public services at the heart of their campaign with higher taxes to pay for it. More on the election later, but first, here's Kirsty Lang with more of today's news.
The jury in the trial of the man accused of murdering Jill Dando was told today of new forensic evidence. The prosecution claims a particle of firearms residue was found on Barry George's clothing, which bears a resemblance to material found on the TV presenter's body. Barry George denies murder.
Jill Dando's fiancé Alan Farthing was among those attending the second day of the trial, when the prosecution focused on forensic evidence linking Barry George to the murder weapon. Orlando Pownall for the Crown said firearms experts had linked 3 particles of residue from the fired gun found in Dando's hair to a particle recovered from Barry George's coat pocket. Pownall described the finding as compelling evidence of his guilt. He also said Barry George had been devious in police interviews, telling lies until confronted with independent evidence of his obsession with guns and celebrities. Questioning of the first 3 witnesses focused on whether Jill Dando had received any threatening letters. Director Sita Kumar was one of 2 colleagues from the Crime Watch programme who said she hadn't. Her agent Alison Lewis recalled one racist but not personally threatening letter. criticising Jill Dando for making a TV aid appeal on behalf of Kosovan refugees. Michael Mansfield QC defending focused on the timing of the letter just days before the murder. But the prosecution maintained that while he may have had no rational motive, it was Barry George, the defendant, who shot Jill Dando. The case continues. Samira Ahmed, Channel 4 News at the Old Bailey.
Railtrack were aware of problems with the line at Hatfield in Hertfordshire a full year before the derailment in which 4 people died. A report out today says Railtrack had no proper communication with or control of the maintenance contractors Balfour Beatty. In one example, a track inspector employed by Balfour Beatty admitted that he usually walked in a ditch beside the Hatfield rails, meaning he was unable to see them properly. The report also said that Railtrack were told about the cracks in the line but did not fully appreciate their significance. The Ministry of Agriculture today reported the lowest number of foot and mouth cases, just 1, and it says it's urgently considering some new points put forward by a farmer on Exmoor, Guy Thomas Everard, who's refusing to have his cattle culled. There are predictions that as more cattle go out to pasture in the next few weeks, the number of outbreaks will rise. American defence experts have been in London today trying to persuade the Foreign Office of the merits of President Bush's new missile defence plan known as Son of Star Wars. British backing is very important since the early warning installation at Fylingdales in Yorkshire would have to be part of the new system. The Foreign Office is insisting that it's not yet made up its mind about the subject. An 18-year-old woman who was convicted of taking part in the rape of another woman beside a London canal has been sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. Claire Marsh was among a group of up to 12 young people who attacked the woman in July last year. She held the victim down. Her lawyer revealed that Marsh is pregnant but is having an abortion. The markets now, and the week started calmly. The index of 100 leading shares was up by 16 points. A short time ago, the pound was down nearly a cent against the dollar, and sterling was up fractionally against the euro. And now the weather and sunny days ahead. The satellite shows clear skies and plenty of sunshine for most places. Tonight will be dry and clear, turning cool inland with the chance of ground frost as temperatures dip to 2 degrees. Tomorrow is another fine day with some sunshine, although scattered showers could push westwards across England and Wales during the afternoon. And the temperature chart shows cold conditions overnight, but it'll warm up tomorrow with the highest temperatures in Scotland reaching 18 degrees.
When we come back, you've seen the polls, but how will the votes add up? Plus, we're on the road to find out what you think. All eyes on the swing voters tonight. We're in Kettering to see how the parties are faring in one ultra-marginal seat.
For just £14.99 a month, you can enjoy a unique doorway to a whole new world that AOL are making simpler, faster, and easier to use for everyone. So without any more costly telephone bills, you can go wherever you want, whenever you want. And if you're not a member yet, we've got something special for you.
Now you can try AOL for absolutely nothing. Just call 0800 237 237 for your completely free trial pack.
No more phony war. The waiting is over. The general election campaign is finally underway. Throughout the coming month, we'll be cutting through the spin to bring you the facts which matter and the latest trends. In a moment, we'll be hearing from the most closely contested Labour-Tory marginal in the country. But first, Mark Easton looks at how the numbers stack up. Mark.
OK, well, let's start by reminding ourselves how things went at the last election and the huge majority Tony Blair's been enjoying at Westminster for the past 4 years. Remember, you need 330 seats to have a majority over all the other parties, so there's the winning post for an overall majority. And there are the 419 seats Labour actually won. On the opposition benches, the Conservatives with just 165 seats, 46 Liberal Democrats and 29 others, mostly the Scottish and Welsh Nationalists and, of course, the Northern Ireland parties. An overall majority for Labour, then, of 179 seats. In short, a landslide. So that was the result. But how do the actual seats translate into the levels of support for each of the parties? Well, here is how it was at the 97 general election. Labour won 44% of the vote, well ahead of the Tories on 31%, with the Liberal Democrats on 17%, and the other parties there with just 8%. So now, how does it look as we go into election 2001? Our political analyst, Peter Kellner, has taken the data from all the latest polls, crunched the numbers to root out any anti-Tory bias, and according to his latest poll of polls, Labour has actually increased its support by 2% to 46%, but the Tories are also up by 3 to 34%, though that still leaves them 12% behind Labour. The Lib Dems, they've fallen back from 17 to 14%, leaving the others with 6%. And what would that mean for the general election result? Well, this is Tony's pile. Each of these red blocks represents the 179 seats in Labour's huge majority. From Kettering, right down in the front here, a swing of less than 1% will swing that back for the Tories. Right up to the back here to Mitcham and Morden, where the required swing is more than 14%. So just how far will the Tory tide eat into Labour's electoral defences? On the basis of our latest poll, the answer is not much. It shows just a swing of 0.5% to the Tories. That would mean Labour's huge majority would fall by 8 seats to a mere 171. Nothing like good enough for William Hague. He'll be hoping that his campaign will lift his party to a much better result than that. Their first target is this point here, a swing of 7.3%. If the Tory tide reaches here, Labour loses 90 seats, some to the Lib Dems or other parties like Oldham East over there, and they would lose their overall majority in the Commons. But if William Hague is really serious about his party winning this election, he needs to do this, a swing of 11.5%. Now, if he managed that, more than 140 of these Labour seats would go. It would be a swing to break all post-war records, and from where the Tories are in the polls today would represent the most extraordinary turnaround in political history. So what are the chances of that sort of turnaround? Well, we've gone to the first target on the Tories' hit list, Kettering, to find out. And the parties have theirs, we have ours. Today sees the first outing for our very own Channel 4 News battle bus. And Sarah Smith is on board.
We've brought the bus to one part of the country where the election is certainly not a foregone conclusion. Welcome to Kettering, where, as you can see, the weather is less than entirely clement. It will take only 189 votes here for the Tories to win the seat back, and there are certainly far more voters than that who are still completely undecided. This afternoon, when it was perfect campaigning weather, beautiful sunshine, I went out to meet some of Kettering's don't-knows. All quiet today in this ordinary English market town, but not for much longer. This is a key electoral battleground. Now the phony election war is over and the campaign begins in earnest, the streets of Kettering are about to become hotly disputed territory. Will any of the heat or light generated by the campaign make any real difference to the more mundane process of manufacturing printing presses? Business is good at Timpson's, but they don't thank the government for that and worry real issues affecting business will be ignored.
The one issue that this election should be about is the euro. Whether the euro will actually be debated is another matter, but I feel that in terms of the history of Great Britain, the decision that's going to be taken in the next couple of years about whether we should go into the euro or not is the major decision of my lifetime.
Father of 3 and local GP, Leszek Bukowski, was an ardent admirer of Margaret Thatcher. Now he's completely undecided about who has his family's best interests at heart. Do you think you paid too much tax?
Well, I do, and I'm sure I'm not the only person to say that. But I'd like to see a tax system that's fair, and obviously, ideally, I'd love to see a tax system which frees up some of my earnings for me to decide on how to spend them, yes.
There's no evidence of an outbreak of election fever in Kettering just yet. But the many who are still undecided, like music teacher Mary Cooper, do know what they're listening out for.
I think I'll be looking to see what they're offering in education and what they're offering families.
What would you like them to be offering families?
Something for the children who've missed out on everything that's been offered in the last year. Those families with children sort of who are going to miss on the baby bonds and things like that. What about them when they get to 18?
When you're besieged by campaign literature and canvassing telephone calls, does that actually make much difference in terms of how you would vote?
I find it mildly irritating and it goes in the bin.
Now, we can't quite manage to speak to 189 swing voters, but we have got a fair selection of the Kettering electorate with us here to try and find out what the key issues are that could determine the outcome of the election in this seat. Peter, we saw you in the film there telling us you're worried the euro isn't going to be fully debated in this election. What makes you worry about that?
Well, I think that there's very little to choose between the main parties on issues like education and the health service. And the one issue where there is a big difference between the approaches of the parties is the euro. Now, I'm a manufacturer and export 80% of what we produce, a lot of it to Europe. And in spite of that, I'm very much against the euro.
But there will be a referendum in 2 years' time. That's when to air those issues, isn't it?
Tony Blair is hell-bent on getting us into the euro. If he gets elected in this election, there's nothing is going to stop him getting us into the euro, with or without a referendum. I think that the timing of a referendum will be such that it will be a foregone conclusion before it's called. The message to the electorate is, if you want to give up the pound, if you want to take the first step on a route which will take you into a European superstate, then vote Labour.
Now, Leszek, we know you were a Thatcher fan. You didn't vote Labour the last time. No. 4 years on into a Labour government, are you more likely to vote for them now, do you think?
Yes, I am. On the reason being that 4 years ago, if somebody said to me, well, do you think they're going to make a reasonable job of it? I'd have said, I really don't think so. But in terms of running the economy, I think they've been pretty conservative, remarkably so, more than any other Labour administration, I fancy. And so I think they have run the economy very well. They've run other things better than I perhaps would have thought. I have concerns over education and concerns over health, but certainly I would be more likely now than I was 4 years ago to have voted Labour, absolutely, yeah.
Eleanor, you work in the health service as well, like Leszek. Is that really the key issue for you in this election?
I think it's one of the major ones. Again, like Leszek, there are concerns about education as well, but my family's quite young at the moment. But the health service is the one that really affects me at the moment.
And is that leaning you towards Labour, Conservatives or Lib Dems?
I am not really decided at the moment. There is just there is so much change, to be quite honest, that our heads are spinning, and I think we need to. I need to take a step back and just try and digest all of this information and look at how much the change is going to affect me and the people that I'm looking after.
Now, the other key touchstone issue is probably going to be education, education, education. Mary, you've been working in education in a primary school for the last 4 years. That experience of being in a school under a Labour government makes you more or less favourable towards them?
Well, I've done very well, possibly if I get through the threshold out of the Labour government, but I might have done equally well under a Conservative government. I shall be looking to see in their manifestos to see if they're going to leave primary education alone for the next 4 years and let us get used to the changes that we've had over the last 4 years and before that.
Is that the best promise any party could make to you? They would just leave you alone?
Well, give us time to consolidate what we've changed.
John, you run a pub here in Kettering. What are the key issues that you're going to be making up your mind on?
I think certainly we've got to have some positive action on certainly the booze cruising that goes on and trying to cut down on the amount of illegally imported alcohol that comes in.
You're not going to choose who's the next government on the basis of their policies towards alcohol, are you?
No, certainly not. No, I think it's got to be done a bit more. We need to have a few more of the old-fashioned characters that we used to have in politics. Everybody seems very bland now, and there's sort of nobody that really stands out significantly that actually would stand out as a leader of the country, I think.
If you had to choose between the three leaders of the parties, who would you most want to see as Prime Minister?
Very hard decision to make, and one that I haven't quite yet made up my mind, I'm afraid.
Trevor, as a farmer, you've been through the mill in the last few weeks, although Northamptonshire has escaped reasonably well from the foot-to-mouth crisis, hasn't it? Has it changed the way you think you might vote in this election?
Not personally, no. I mean, I think we feel that we've been very let down by this government with regards to the last 4 or 5 years. Our incomes have been so affected with the euro, and the fact that everything's coming from the continent, legislation-wise, the government's red taping everything. And they promised that they would reduce the red tape, but it hasn't happened. We've gone through foot and mouth, and we're still having it at the moment, and yet they've done nothing about the amount of food.
Are you?
No, certainly not. No, I think it's got to be done a bit more. We need to have a few more of the old-fashioned characters that we used to have in politics. Everybody seems very bland now, and there's sort of nobody that really stands out significantly that actually would stand out as a leader of the country, I think.
If you had to choose between the three leaders of the parties, who would you most want to see as Prime Minister?
Very hard decision to make, and one that I haven't quite yet made up my mind, I'm afraid.
Trevor, as a farmer, you've been through the mill in the last few weeks, although Northamptonshire has escaped reasonably well from the foot-and-mouth crisis, hasn't it? Has it changed the way you think you might vote in this election?
Not personally, no. I mean, I think we feel that we've been very let down by this government with regards to the last 4 or 5 years. Our incomes have been so affected with the euro, and the fact that everything's coming from the continent, legislation-wise, the government's red taping everything. And they promised that they would reduce the red tape, but it hasn't happened. We've gone through foot and mouth, and we're still having it at the moment, and yet they've done nothing about the amount of food that's coming into this country from foot and mouth infected areas. Even our army is eating foreign food. I mean,
but of course the government think all the farmers vote Tory anyway, don't they? You're a lost cause to them.
well, I'm afraid they think wrongly, don't they? Because, I mean, you have to ask farmers, and I'm sure you'd find a lot of people didn't vote Conservative. You know, they've got very mixed views. We aren't the miners in disguise, as you might say, and I think there's a lot of feeling from Labour MPs that we're going to get what the miners got under the Conservatives, and I'm afraid we produce food for this country. Let us get on with that, and that's what we want to do.
OK, move over here. John, when it comes to making up your mind about how you're going to vote in the election, do you see a clear difference between the parties to help you choose?
Very little at all. The present Labour government, I think, is almost as Conservative as the Conservative government was previously. And the Conservatives haven't really established a niche in the political market, have they? So, no, I don't think there is a difference.
So how will you make up your mind then if you think they're both the same?
Europe, for one thing. I don't particularly want to be European, and I want to stay. So I want a referendum very quickly. I certainly don't want a single currency. Education is another one. I've been a school governor, both in primary and secondary schools. I think they've got it all wrong. They're throwing money in the wrong places. If one of them were to say the place to spend the money is the primary schools, £1 spent there is worth £10 spent in secondary schools, they'd have my vote, I think. It's that.
Fair enough.
That's wrong.
I'll come round here to Brian. Do you see a clear difference between the parties to help you make up your mind?
Not an awful lot, to be quite honest. Early years education is what I'm involved with, and things were started under the previous Conservative government and have continued very well under the present government, and one would hope that they will continue with whoever wins this next election, hopefully without lowering the standards, which is our biggest fear, that if things expand at a rapid rate, standards could be lowered. So
you're looking for more of the same. Does that mean you'll vote for another 4 years of Labour government?
Still very undecided, to be quite honest. It'll be very interesting to see what both parties, or sort of all the parties, are actually saying about early years education, and I think my mind will be made up on that.
So Jane, if a politician could promise you anything that would guarantee them your vote here in Kettering, what would it be?
Well, obviously I work for the health service, so I would like to see more improvements in the health service. But I think the health service is used as a political football, and sometimes because of that we get a bad press because both parties are too keen to emphasise the bad things in the health service. So I think
OK. Thanks very much. Now, over the next 4 weeks, we're going to be taking our battle bus all around the country, so it could be coming to somewhere near you very soon, airing all the real election issues. But for now, it's back to London.
Sarah Smith, in the extraordinarily marginal seat of Kettering, couldn't put a cigarette paper between any of them, as far as I could tell. You've heard the experts, you've heard the voters. What do you think the outcome of the general election will be? Tonight, we launch an online challenge. Predict the result in our own election sweepstake. No prizes on offer, just the opportunity to best some of the country's leading political brains. We are asking for 3 predictions. First, which party will win the largest number of seats? What do you think their majority will be, in seats, that is? And finally, how many votes will the winning party get? There are lots of useful stats on our website to help you make your prediction and put in your entry. There's our address. If you want to enter by telephone, ring 09012 77 0077. That's 09012 77 0077. Full details on page 360 of Foretel, our teletext service. Well, an early shot in the campaign has already been fired by the Scottish Secretary, Helen Liddle. She brushed away suggestions from the Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott, that Labour would review the funding formula which delivers more money for public spending to the devolved regions per person than it does to England. And that didn't reassure the leader of the Scottish National Party, John Swinney.
John Prescott has promised blood on the carpet in relation to the attack on public expenditure in Scotland. That's why Scotland needs strong SNP voices in Westminster to protect our vital services of health, education and crime from the London spending acts of the Labour Party. That's why we stand for Scotland and the London parties don't.
John Swinney. Well, our political editor, Eleanor Goodman, is in Downing Street. Now's the moment, Eleanor, where civil servants start preparing for an alternative party to come into government and also, of course, the option of business as usual. How does it feel down there?
Well, the excitement's over for today now. I mean, the problem for the government is not making today a bit of an anticlimax. Hence these rather frantic efforts today we saw in the school to up the excitement level. But the danger is, I think, of those things is that far from getting over media cynicism, they actually increase it, because the sight of those school children listening with bated breath to the Prime Minister's next platform may have been a little disconcerting.
So, I mean, where do we go from here? The next thing that happens is Parliament has to be sort of finished up with, during which some rather critical stuff will get lost, presumably. And then what?
Well, they've already announced that 7 bills will be dropped in the Lords, and that includes hunting, which is one of the most contentious ones. Some of the others they will manage to negotiate with the Tories and get through. Then we'll have one last hurrah at Prime Minister's questions, and basically Parliament will dissolve on Friday and then off to the hustings. But tomorrow morning you do get one other sort of set piece, which is the Prime Minister rallying his troops at the PLP meeting, and I'm sure the message there will be, as it has been throughout the day, that Labour can't take success for granted, that they must fight every inch of the way.
Eleanor, it's looking a rather deserted scene there, as you suggested, but there will be some pizzazz and fizz before the end of all this.
The whole point of this campaign is for Blair, if he wins, to win in such a way as he sees it, that will give him an enthusiastic mandate for both what he described in his speech today, leading in Europe, and welfare reform. He doesn't want a grudging one. Now, the Tories say he isn't going to get a mandate at all, but his concern, his second-order concern, if you like, is not to win just to win, but to win well.
Eleanor, thank you. Kirsty, last look at tonight's headlines.
The Northern Ireland First Minister David Trimble has threatened to resign on July the 1st unless the IRA begin decommissioning paramilitary weapons. And the son of the great train robber, Ronnie Biggs, has described how he urged his father not to return to Britain.
Main headline, June the 7th. Prime Minister finally announces the general election date, appealing to voters for a second Labour term. Campaigning has already begun. Conservative leader William Hague telling cheering supporters he's confident of victory. Liberal Democrats focusing on better public services. We're back tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Until then, from Kirsty and from me, that is Channel 4 News. Good evening.